For decades, Michael Douglas has occupied a rare space in Hollywood, a performer whose career has stretched across generations while surviving the industry's harshest cycles. Audiences have watched him evolve from leading man to elder statesman, from sharp-edged corporate antihero to reflective veteran. Alongside him, Catherine Zeta-Jones has built her own formidable legacy, defined by discipline, charisma, and international appeal. To the public, their marriage often appeared polished and resilient, reinforced by red carpet appearances and carefully worded interviews. Yet long relationships, especially those lived in front of cameras, rarely fit into fairy tale templates. This documentary-style reflection explores how their partnership developed, endured pressure, and adapted to change over time. Rather than chasing rumor or sensationalism, it looks at broader themes: aging, caregiving, identity shifts, and the emotional recalibration required in long marriages. The story is less about scandal and more about endurance, how two accomplished individuals navigated fame, health crises, and evolving personal priorities. In examining their journey, we uncover a more human portrait of commitment. Not effortless, not always symmetrical, but continuously renegotiated in the face of time and circumstance. When Douglas and Zeta-Jones married in 2000, headlines focused heavily on the 25-year age difference, framing it as either romantic destiny or inevitable complication. Public fascination with age gaps often overshadows the more practical realities couples face. In their case, the relationship began at different life stages. Douglas had already experienced a long career arc, a previous marriage, and significant public scrutiny. Zeta-Jones was entering a peak expansion phase professionally, with global recognition growing rapidly. These contrasting trajectories did not automatically signal instability, but they introduced complexities from the start. Long marriages often depend on timing as much as compatibility. When two people are moving at different speeds, emotionally, physically, or professionally, they must consciously negotiate expectations. Interviews over the years suggest that both understood the external noise surrounding them, yet external commentary can subtly influence internal dynamics. Even when couples claim indifference to gossip, repeated narratives can create defensive postures. In that environment, partnership becomes both personal and performative. The challenge is not merely staying united, but staying authentic while the world speculates. Their early years, therefore, were shaped not only by love and ambition, but by the constant awareness of being observed. Fame intensifies ordinary marital pressures. Everyday disagreements, when lived privately, dissipate naturally. When lived publicly, they risk amplification. For high-profile couples, even silence can be interpreted as conflict. During the early 2000s, Douglas and Zeta-Jones balanced demanding film schedules with parenthood, relocation between countries, and relentless media coverage. In many ways, they were managing dual empires. Professional momentum does not pause for domestic adjustment, and domestic life does not always accommodate professional ambition. The balancing act requires invisible labor, coordinating travel, prioritizing children's stability, and preserving moments of normalcy. Observers often mistake polished appearances for smooth realities. Yet sustaining public composure can require immense emotional discipline. Over time, constant exposure can encourage couples to internalize stress rather than publicly acknowledge strain. That quiet absorption of pressure is common in long marriages, especially when reputation and brand value are intertwined. The early stability of their relationship likely relied on mutual understanding of this environment. However, resilience built on endurance alone may carry hidden costs. As many therapists note, unspoken stress does not disappear, it accumulates. In this sense, their story mirrors broader truths about modern partnerships navigating high expectations. A pivotal chapter emerged when Douglas was diagnosed with throat cancer in 2010. Health crises can dramatically reconfigure marital roles. The partner who once embodied strength may suddenly require sustained care, while the other assumes logistical and emotional leadership. Publicly, the narrative centered on courage and recovery. Privately, such periods often involve exhaustion, uncertainty, and identity shifts. Serious illness forces confrontation with vulnerability. For individuals accustomed to control and authority, dependency can feel destabilizing. Caregiving, meanwhile, demands patience and resilience that frequently go unrecognized. Zeta-Jones supported Douglas throughout treatment, reportedly reorganizing schedules and family routines to prioritize recovery. In long marriages, caregiving is not merely an act of kindness. It becomes a structural transformation. Power balances adjust, daily rhythms change, and future planning is reassessed. Even successful recoveries leave psychological imprints. Couples must recalibrate not only health expectations, but also perceptions of capability. Illness can deepen intimacy, yet it can also surface unspoken fears about mortality and independence. Their experience during this time underscores a universal reality. Surviving disease is not solely a medical achievement. It is a relational one, requiring adaptation, empathy, and shared resilience beyond what public narratives typically capture. Simultaneously, Zeta-Jones faced her own health challenges, speaking openly about bipolar II disorder. Mental health conditions introduce complexities that differ from physical illness, yet demand equal compassion. Managing mood fluctuations, medication adjustments, and public misunderstanding can strain even stable relationships. When both partners are confronting health-related vulnerability, communication becomes crucial. Couples must discuss not only symptoms, but also emotional capacity. In many long-term partnerships, one person temporarily carries more responsibility while the other recovers equilibrium. The difficulty lies in ensuring that temporary imbalances do not harden into permanent resentment. Public figures face an added layer of scrutiny. Disclosures become headlines rather than private conversations. By addressing mental health publicly, Zeta-Jones contributed to broader awareness, yet personal disclosure also invites speculation. For a marriage already navigating physical recovery, the overlap of challenges required extraordinary patience. Experts often emphasize that empathy during dual crises can strengthen bonds if supported by honest dialogue. Their story illustrates how parallel struggles can either fragment a relationship or deepen mutual understanding. The outcome depends less on the presence of hardship and more on the willingness to address it transparently, without assigning blame or diminishing individual agency. In 2013, the couple briefly separated, prompting widespread media reaction. Public announcements of separation often appear abrupt, but insiders frequently describe them as the culmination of gradual drift. After years defined by health battles and professional recalibration, both partners were adjusting to new versions of themselves. Aging, recovery, and evolving ambitions can subtly shift compatibility patterns. Separation, in many marriages, functions less as an ending and more as a diagnostic pause. It allows individuals to assess whether distance clarifies priorities or simply magnifies loneliness. Reports at the time suggested the split was amicable, lacking dramatic accusations. That tone indicated reflection rather than hostility. For couples navigating long histories, temporary separation can serve as recalibration rather than collapse. It can expose the emotional cost of silence and highlight the necessity of renewed communication. Observers often interpret any separation as failure, yet relationship experts argue that structured distance can sometimes restore perspective. In this case, the period apart underscored the distinction between fatigue and incompatibility. Recognizing that difference may have played a role in their eventual reconciliation, suggesting that clarity sometimes emerges only when daily routines are briefly interrupted. Reconciliation followed later that year, reframing public assumptions. Coming back together after separation does not erase prior strain. Instead, it signals intentional recommitment. Couples who reconcile often describe the process as entering a new chapter rather than resuming the old one. For Douglas and Zeta-Jones, reconciliation likely involved candid discussions about aging, ambition, and mutual expectations. Acceptance of change becomes central in such transitions. Long marriages cannot rely indefinitely on early chemistry. They must adapt to evolving energy levels and life priorities. Aging introduces asymmetry, physical stamina, professional drive, and social interests may diverge. The challenge lies in honoring these differences without interpreting them as rejection. Interviews in subsequent years reflected a more measured tone, emphasizing gratitude and partnership over glamour. That tonal shift suggests maturity rather than disillusionment. Reconciliation in mature relationships often replaces idealism with realism. It prioritizes respect over performance and sustainability over spectacle. Their decision to reunite indicated recognition that shared history and family bonds outweighed temporary divergence. In doing so, they demonstrated that recommitment can be an active choice, not a passive continuation, requiring humility and renewed emotional transparency. As their children grew older and career demands shifted, the couple made practical lifestyle adjustments, including selling properties. Real estate decisions among high-profile families frequently spark speculation, yet downsizing can simply reflect changing needs. Maintaining multiple estates across continents demands significant resources and constant oversight. When children become independent, priorities naturally evolve. For long-married couples, simplifying assets can symbolize transition into a less frenetic stage of life. Public interpretation, however, often gravitates toward dramatic explanations. Property sales become coded as pre-divorce signals rather than pragmatic planning. In interviews, Douglas has spoken broadly about aging realistically, acknowledging that priorities change with time. Such comments align with broader trends among retirees seeking reduced logistical burdens. The lesson here extends beyond celebrity culture. Adaptation is frequently mistaken for instability. In enduring partnerships, flexibility can strengthen commitment. Choosing fewer homes or altered schedules may reflect intention rather than retreat. By reframing these changes as strategic rather than symbolic, observers gain a clearer understanding of how long marriages evolve. Stability does not require static circumstances. It requires shared agreement on direction, even when that direction involves letting go of former markers of success. Aging remains one of the most under-discussed dynamics in long-term relationships. Societal narratives often celebrate youthful romance, but overlook later life recalibration. For Douglas, entering his 70s meant confronting reduced stamina and shifting professional identity. For Zeta-Jones, continued creative momentum introduced a contrast in pace. When partners age at different experiential speeds, emotional negotiation becomes essential. Feelings of inadequacy or guilt can surface, particularly in cultures that equate productivity with worth. Honest acknowledgement of physical limits, without shame, is critical. In various interviews, Douglas has emphasized acceptance rather than denial as key to sustaining partnership. That philosophy reflects a broader truth. Aging within marriage requires vulnerability. Pretending to maintain former capacity can create tension, whereas transparency invites empathy. Long unions thrive not by freezing time, but by accommodating it. They involve redefining contribution beyond traditional roles. A partner slowing physically may contribute wisdom or emotional steadiness. A partner maintaining high energy may inject dynamism. Balance shifts, yet mutual respect anchors continuity. Their journey illustrates that adaptation, when mutual and intentional, can transform potential insecurity into collaborative growth, reinforcing rather than weakening commitment. Another essential dimension involves pride. In many cultures, especially for men socialized to equate strength with independence, needing support can feel destabilizing. Illness and aging challenge that identity. Admitting vulnerability within marriage requires dismantling internalized expectations. Douglas has spoken candidly about the difficulty of relinquishing certain forms of control. Such admissions resonate widely because they transcend celebrity. Long marriages often falter not from dramatic betrayal, but from accumulated defensiveness. When pride prevents honest dialogue, distance grows quietly. Conversely, when partners articulate fear and limitation, intimacy deepens. Zeta-Jones' public openness about mental health similarly required courage, challenging stigma. Their shared willingness to discuss vulnerability likely contributed to renewed equilibrium. Experts emphasize that sustained commitment depends on adaptive communication. Couples who evolve their dialogue styles over decades are more likely to endure than those who rely on early patterns. By acknowledging imperfections publicly, They reframed strength as transparency rather than invulnerability. This shift highlights a broader cultural lesson. Enduring partnership is less about perpetual harmony and more about continuous emotional recalibration, guided by humility and mutual affirmation rather than ego preservation. Ultimately, the narrative of their marriage reflects a broader examination of endurance. Love initiates commitment, but